Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. And our topic for tonight is the U.S.'s weak case against Julian Assange. And Steve says, hello, everybody. Hi, Steve. Tonight, we're going to focus on, or for this stream anyway, we're going to focus on a post by Chris Hedges. The title of the post is Julian Assange's Grand Inquisitor. It was written on February 22nd, 2024. You're looking at Chris Hedges' Substack. There's a graphic by Mr. Fish, the famous Mr. Fish who always works with Chris Hedges. And that looks like a kangaroo. In the middle of the kangaroo is Julian Assange's face behind bars. I don't know why he's in the belly of the kangaroo, though. It seems like he should be in the belly of the Democratic donkey, but it's called Kangaroo Courtship by Mr. Fish, this cartoon. Anyway, this is dated London, so maybe Chris Hedges is in London now to attend the trial. The prosecution for the U.S., which is seeking to deny Julian Assange's appeal of an extradition order begun by the Trump administration and embraced by the Biden administration, grounded its arguments on Wednesday. Excuse me just a second. I'm reminded that I should be sharing this. On Facebook. Okay. After that, getting back to the piece. The extradition order begun by the Trump administration, embraced by the Biden administration, grounded its arguments on Wednesday in the dubious affidavits filed by a U.S. federal prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia, Gordon Kromberg. The charges articulated by Kromberg, often false, to make the case for extradition, did not fly with the two high court judges, Jeremy Johnson and Dame Victoria Sharp, who were overseeing Julian's final appeal in the British courts. The prosecuting attorneys, well, that's good news, isn't it? Prosecuting attorneys, under questioning from the judges, were knocked off balance when challenged about the veracity, that means the truthfulness, folks, of several of the claims which Kromberg made in support of the indictment against Julian. This was especially the case when the attorneys argued that the classified documents Julian released in 2010, known as the Iraq and Afghan warlords, were not redacted. These unredacted documents, they told the court, jeopardized the lives of those named in the documents and caused some to, quote, disappear, unquote. As defense lawyers Edward Fitzgerald, KC, and Mark Summers, KC, made clear, and the judges seemed to acknowledge, the documents were indeed redacted by Julian as he worked with media partners such as The Guardian and the New York Times. When WikiLeaks published classified military documents concerning the Afghanistan and Iraq wars, along with U.S. State Department cables. The unredacted versions were first published by the website Cryptome after two reporters from The Guardian published a book with the passcode to the documents leading to their publication by other online organizations. So I ask you, why aren't these other online organizations on trial? Why aren't they being prosecuted by the United States? Why are they prosecuting the guy who did redact the documents? Julian contacted the U.S. government, as Attorney Summers, told the court and spoke to them at length in an attempt to prevent the unredacted cables from being published. In the end, the U.S. State Department chose not to act. U.S. officials have sheepishly admitted they have no evidence of anyone named in the documents being harmed. Other allegations, such as that Julian tried to help Chelsea Manning, who leaked the documents, decode a password hash to access documents or protect her identity, or that he sought to conspire with computer hackers, have also been debunked. A report provided to Judge Beratzer by a U.S. military forensic expert found that even if Manning was able to decode the password hash, which neither she nor anyone at WikiLeaks ever did, it would not have provided access to documents. It would not have provided her with anonymity, and it would not have given her access to documents which she did not already have. The expert also described that someone with Manning's technical knowledge, skill, and experience, as well as her lawful access to top secret materials, would have known this. But these Kronberg-inspired canards are all the U.S. has, so it uses them. By the end of the day, it seemed likely that probably by April, since requested written briefs have to be returned into the judges in March, the two judges will permit an appeal on at least a few of the points. This will, conveniently for the Biden administration, which I expect does not want to take on the contentious issue of extraditing Julian while fueling the genocide in Gaza, mean that any extradition would occur after the election. Oh, wow. That's an interesting conclusion by Chris, isn't it? Of course, it means more hell for Julian because the issue would be unresolved for probably the remainder of this year. The two-day hearing was Julian's last chance to request an appeal of the extradition decision made in 2022 by the then Home Secretary Priti Patel, and of many of the rulings of District Judge Vanessa Beratzer in 2021. If Julian is denied an appeal, he can request the European Court of Human Rights, the ECTHR, for a stay of execution under Rule 39, which is given in, quote, exceptional circumstances, unquote, and, quote, only where there is an imminent risk of irreparable harm, unquote. But it is possible the British court could order Julian's immediate extradition prior to a Rule 39 instruction, or decide to ignore a request from the ECTHR to allow Julian to have his case heard by the court. The CIA seeks Julian's imprisonment in the U.S. because of the release of the documents known as Vault 7, which exposed hacking tools that permit the CIA to access our phones, computers, and televisions, turning them, even when switched off, into monitoring and recording devices. The formal extradition request does not include charges based on the release of the Vault 7 files, but the U.S. request also only came after the release of the Vault 7 material. The CIA usually gets what it wants, but for the near future, I expect Julian to continue to rock in His Majesty's prison, Belmarsh, where he's been in prison for nearly 5 years as he deteriorates physically and psychologically This slow motion execution is intentional. It is hard to call any court ruling other than the dropping of the charges against him a victory, but the longer he stays out of U.S. hands, the more hope he has of regaining his freedom for carrying out the most important investigative journalism of our generation. Prosecution attorney Claire Dobbin in KC, Claire Dobbin KC, her long blonde hair spilling out from under her official curled blonde court wig, clung to the Kronberg affidavit like the Holy Grail, reading sections of it to the court. Quote, it is not part of the ordinary responsibilities of journalists to actively solicit and publish classified information, unquote, she told the court in one of her most obtuse statements. The court charges, she said, echoing Kronberg, were, quote, complicity in illegal acts to obtain or receive voluminous databases of classified information, unquote. The attempt to, quote, obtain classified information through computer hacking, unquote, and, quote, publishing certain documents that contained the unredacted names of innocent people who risked their safety and freedom to provide information to the United States and its allies, including local Afghans and Iraqis, journalists, religious leaders, human rights advocates, and political dissidents from repressive regimes. Repressive regimes like the United States, you mean, right? Of course, as Julian's defense pointed out, many of these people were informants, aiding and abetting U.S. war crimes. But the phrase, quote, war crimes, unquote, was never mentioned by the prosecution, magically erased from the case. The prosecution, relying on Kronberg, insists that Julian was not a journalist, that what he published was, quote, not in the public interest, unquote, that the U.S. was not seeking his extradition on political grounds. They charged that, quote, hostile foreign governments, terrorist groups, and criminal organizations have exploited WikiLeaks disclosures in order to gain intelligence to be used against the United States and to be used against foreign nationals who provided assistance to the United States, unquote. They said that Osama bin Laden had requested the material posted by WikiLeaks, that the Taliban used the documents to identify informants. First encountered Kronberg, a fervent Zionist with ties to Israel's far-right settler movement in the occupied West Bank, when in the wake of the attacks of 9/11, the U.S. government began imprisoning leading Palestinian activists as, quote, terrorists, unquote, and shutting down Palestinian charities such as the Holy Land Foundation. Kronberg served as the Grand Inquisitor in these witch hunts, going after numerous Muslims, including Ahmed Abu Ali, as well as my friend, the Palestinian professor and activist, Dr. Sami Al-Arian. Al-Arian endured a 6-month show trial in Florida, not unlike Julian's, that saw the government's case collapse in a mass of contradictions and innuendo. During the trial, the government called 80 witnesses and subjected the jury to hundreds of hours of often inane phone transcriptions and recordings made over a 10-year period, which the jury dismissed as, quote, gossip, unquote. Out of the 94 charges made against the 4 defendants, there were no convictions. Of the 17 charges against Al-Arian, including, quote, conspiracy to murder and maim persons abroad, the jury acquitted him of 8 and was hung on the rest. The jurors disagreed on the remaining charges by a count of 10-2, favoring his full acquittal. Following the acquittal, the Palestinian professor, under duress, accepted a plea bargain agreement that would spare him a second trial, saying in his agreement that he'd help people associated with Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the second largest resistance organization in Gaza and the West Bank, with immigration matters. He was sentenced to 57 months in prison. Al-Arian, while in prison, was ordered by Kronberg to testify in the grand jury investigation of the International Institute of Islamic Thought in Herndon, Virginia. when Al-Arian's lawyers asked Kronberg to delay the transfer of the professor to Virginia because of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. Kronberg told them, quote, they can kill each other during Ramadan, they can appear before the grand jury, unquote. Kronberg, according to an affidavit signed by Al-Arian's attorney, Jack Fernandez, also said, quote, I'm not going to put off Dr. Al-Arian's grand jury appearance just to assist in what is becoming the Islamization of America, unquote. God, this is so awful. The government wasted $80 million trying to convict Dr. Al-Arian, who refused Kronberg's demand that he testify and was charged with contempt. He was eventually deported and lives in Turkey. In 2017, Kronberg prosecuted the case of a D.C. police officer accused of buying gift cards in support of terrorism, charges that arose from a controversial sting operation, unquote. The Intercept noted, quote, in court, Kronberg leveled eyebrow-raising allegations that the suspect was also a supporter of the jihadist group Islamic State, as well as the World War II-era German Nazi Party, on the grounds that he owned historical paraphernalia. Referring to an anonymous online commentator who called the defendant, quote, Muslim Nazi scum, unquote, Kronberg argued in court, quote, whether or not that's true, I don't know the answer to that, but the point is that the Nazi stuff in this case is very much related to the ISIS stuff, unquote. Kronberg has as deep an animus for Julian and one suspects for journalists as he does for Muslims. He raises the possibility, a possibility rather foolishly repeated by the prosecution's representatives in London, that Julian, as a foreign national, could be denied First Amendment protections if tried in the United States. This prompted the judges to ask if they had any evidence, quote, any evidence that a foreign national is entitled to the same rights under the First Amendment as a U.S. citizen, unquote. A question Dobbin, fumbling, was unable to answer. He was the other lawyer for the U.S. government. At the same time, Kronberg has offered numerous assurances, repeated by the prosecution on Wednesday, that Julian will not be subjected to harsh prison conditions. He called the possibility that Julian will be housed in a highly restrictive supermax prison, quote, purely speculative, unquote. Kronberg subpoenaed Manning in 2019 to testify before the grand jury in an effort to get her to implicate Julian in, quote, one count of conspiracy to commit computer intrusion, unquote. The charge, which was thoroughly debunked by expert testimony in 2020, Manning appeared before the grand jury but refused to answer questions posed to her. She was held in civil contempt and incarcerated. She was released after the grand jury expired. Kronberg then served her with a second subpoena to appear before another grand jury. Again, she refused to testify, leading to another round of incarceration and fines of $500 a day that were raised to $1,000 a day after 60 days of noncompliance. In March of 2020, while being housed in a detention center in Alexandria, Virginia, she was hospitalized after she attempted to commit suicide. The effort to force Manning to implicate Assange is central to the U.S. case. If they can convince the court, Julian agreed to assist Manning in cracking a passcode to access a Department of Defense computer connected to the secret internet protocol network that is SEMP, I guess it's SIPN, used for classified documents and communications. It would allow the government to charge Julian with an actual crime. The fatal flaw in the case against Julian is that he did not commit a crime. He exposed the crimes of others. Those who ordered and carried out these crimes are determined, no matter how they have to deform the British and the U.S. legal systems, to make him pay. This is a wonderful piece by Chris Hedges. I mean, it debunks the whole case against Julian. There is no case against Julian. I mean, this is bullshit. It's a government vendetta. It's been going on for years and years. It's 14 years for Julian, isn't it? I mean, wasn't he? He he originally went to the the Ecuadorian embassy, where he stayed for 7 years. That might have been in 2012, I guess. Okay, for 7 years, and now he's spent another 5 years, okay, in Belmarsh while the legal proceedings go through. That's 12 years of his life. He was 40 when he went in. He's only 52 now. He is 52 now. 12 precious years of his life have been taken away by this bullshit, and they cannot prove a thing. Where is accountability for the people who've been carrying this out, including Joe Biden? This is a crime against the human being. It should be subject to international law. I wonder when we're going to see some action on that particular front. There's got to be some recourse for people putting these trumped up charges up, and going after Julian. Huh?
On non-residents.
On non-citizens and non-residents, yes. On foreign publishers. Yeah. On foreign publishers. There's got to be some legal recourse for this. It's got to be illegal. There at least has to be opening to civil prosecutions where people are made to pay for this kind of persecution of someone. There's got to be something like this going on. Steve Wolfman says, hello, everybody. Steve says, Doc, I honestly believe this is about the Podesta emails about Pizzagate. $50,000 buys a lot of pizza, as well as the murder of Seth Rich. I can't speak to that, Steve. I don't know enough about it. Andy says, hey, all. And Steve says, hi again, Andy. And Steve says, but Julian will be Epstein's. I don't know if he will be Epstein's. I think that he is being Julianed. What's happening to him is a little different from Epstein's, but he's being slowly killed anyway, just because of the harsh treatment he's receiving in prison for so long, just by keeping him a prisoner for so long. If this continues to go on, he will have been a Rip Van Winkle. I mean, this is absolutely, it's a crime that this can be done by the courts to someone. It's a crime. Julian will be Epsteined if brought here. Yeah, he may well be Epsteined. But he's being Julianed right now. And he may continue to be Julianed if brought here. But he shouldn't be brought here. There's no evidence to bring him here. The idea this is not a political case, a political vendetta, is ridiculous. As Steve Wolfbrand says, it's insane. Are there any?
To show U.S. muscle.
Yeah, well, what's going on is they're trying to show that if people mess with the United States with respect to classified material, if publishers reveal secrets, and if they're not the New York Times or some organization like that, they will be persecuted for years and years and years. They will be bankrupted. They will be broken by years and years and years and jailed, and by the process of going through high-stress trials. That's what is going on.
Is that against
he is no crime has been proved against him, and he is getting punished by process.
Is that against international law?
I don't know. He is being punished by the process. I am not an international lawyer. I cannot say whether there are violations of international law here, but to me, this is a human rights crime that's been committed by the United States and by its collaborators in the UK, and to some degree by the Ecuadorians who allowed the UK authorities into the embassy to get Julian. That was unconscionable. Okay, folks, I think that's it for this particular stream. I will immediately be going over to Dee's stream at 9 p.m. Around the World with Dee and Friends to participate in that. I don't know whether she will have, but it's likely that Dee will have another stream tomorrow night. If so, I will be at that stream. And then you will see me again on Tuesday for my long show. Steve says they want to charge him with treason, even though he's not even, an American citizen. Well, if he's not an American citizen, they can't charge him with treason. I mean, that's obvious. The Australians are wanting him back now. They finally have a government in Australia with gumption enough for the U.S. to drop the case and to let him come home. If that government is forceful enough, they can probably get the U.S. to agree. I think the U.S. needs Australian cooperation for what they want to do in Asia to defend against China. And so, I think the Australians have some power here if they will exercise it. I hope there's enough steam in Australia to get them to exercise it. Because if they refuse to collaborate or cooperate with the Americans in Asia, then all our plans go for naught. We would not be able to adjust to that. Andy Candy says, Chris is always on point. So are you, Bunny. So Bonnie thought you were referring to her, Andy. And she went like this. But what if Australia is bringing home to turn him over? Oh, no. They're not going to turn him over to the U.S. No. There's too big a pro-Assange movement in Australia right now. They can't do that. If he goes home, this is done. This is ended. It's over. If the U.S. drops it at this point, or if the U.K. denies the extradition, this is over. Now, that also probably depends on whether Trump is elected. If Trump is elected, he might find other ways to pursue it. I mean, Trump is the biggest SOB in the world. No question about that. Andy says, Energizer Bunny, but so is Bonnie. She has to keep pace with you. Okay, thanks, Andy. Okay, I got to go over to, I have to go over to D's now. So, by the way, I prefer the Hulk to the Energizer Bunny. Andy says hi again, Wolfie. Okay, did I end this properly? No, I don't think I did, so I'm ending it now.